Welcome to Focus on Business, a podcast show for photographers with me, your host, Jane Goodrich. I'm talking to successful photographers so you can learn from our experiences and have the business of your dreams. So join us and let's focus on business. Hi, and welcome to Focus on Business podcast. How are you today, Nathan?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. I am really excited to have you on the show. Nathan is a fantastic wedding photographer and also an amazing software founder of Shoot With Me, which is a fantastic platform to find associate second shooters and also for second shooters and associates to find work. So welcome to Focus on Business. You are master of everything, it seems.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, no, I've been shooting weddings for 17 years. I'm in the Philadelphia area, so I shoot weddings primarily in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, New York, a little bit here and there. And yeah, basically, if I can avoid having to sleep in a hotel at nighttime, I will. I'm past the stage of wanting to shoot destination weddings and travel all over the world. I want to be home every night if I can.
Well, you have 4 children, so that makes it,
Yes.
a reason why you would want to be home or not, actually. Sometimes I think it's great being a wedding photographer that travels.
100%.
So tell us how you got into photography and why wedding photography?
Yeah, so I was, like many people, I was a hobbyist, not just into photography. I thought it was fun to go out and take random pictures of, plants in the backyard or whatever. It was also like, real talk, I had a little social anxiety as a teenager, and if I could be behind the camera, it kind of allowed me to sneak into situations that I might not be naturally comfortable with, and kind of have a purpose or a reason. So not to go down a therapy session or anything to deal with that, but that was probably a very real dynamic for me. Was just having photography be a way to break into more social settings and things like that. And then as my, hobby turned into something a little bit more serious, I was spending real money on gear and, nerding out over that kind of thing. My cousin got engaged, and my aunt was like, "Hey, Nathan, you want to shoot the wedding?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. That'd be awesome." I had my best friend at the time, his brother-in-law was a wedding photographer, and I always thought it was cool that he got to do that as a career. So $300 later for that wedding, I was now a wedding photographer. And it's funny talking to newer photographers or experienced ones, just what their first paid job looked like. And it's one of those things where nobody really goes from not getting paid to getting paid like a full reasonable rate for their first job. There's always like, "Oh, I'm going to work for free," or "I'm going to work severely discounted," or whatever. That's how I got into it. I did a good job on that first wedding. It was an easy day, overcast, tent wedding. And her friends, my cousin's friends, started reaching out after the fact. And a year later, I was like, "Oh, I should make a website," and it kind of ballooned from there.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think there's a lot in there, actually, in terms of, I think we all like being behind a camera. It does, I think that's fascinating what you said, is like, it does allow you to be in situations where, it takes away the awkwardness because you have a camera. It does spark a conversation, but you also can put it up and not feel like you have to talk to anybody. I've done that quite a few times too. If you were to go back to 17 years ago and tell yourself, would you do, I'm sure your business evolved and, pricing obviously increases when you realize, oh, wow, I'm never going to make any money if I keep charging that. Would you tell yourself something? Like, what would you tell yourself to do differently or not?
Yeah. There's always that Pandora's box of like, hey, you go back and you get to change something and it might completely mess up your journey or have it lead to something that you don't intend. But the advice that I give new photographers now is get organized before you think you need to. So for many years, I was managing all of my bookings on a spreadsheet, and I'd get an inquiry via email, and I would be emailing back and forth with a couple. And if they got to the point where they booked, I'd put them on this spreadsheet with all of my bookings and manage it that way. And people would often say, oh, you should use a CRM, or you should use some sort of system in order to better track things. Because there'd be times where I'd get an inquiry and I'd follow up right away. And then, a week later, I'm sending a follow-up. Whereas another client, I might be following up 2 weeks later if I didn't hear back or whatever. I had no system in place to manage inquiries or bookings or anything like that. And it really wasn't a major problem until it became a major problem. And I didn't realize how fast or how devastating it would be when a mistake was made. And happy to get into what that mistake was if you want to.
Yeah, no, tell us. Right. I have mine.
Yeah. So about 4 or 5 years into running my business, I was still working as an electrician as a day job. I hadn't gotten to the point where I felt comfortable kind of severing that tie and going full time in the photography business. I had a young family at the time, and finally got to the point where I decided to quit my job. I had 30 plus weddings booked for that year. Probably somewhere, average price point between, I don't know, 3,500 and 4,500. So, not top of the market by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not doing, $1,000 weddings or anything like that. So, I had this one couple that they inquired for, I don't know, let's say April 15th. I don't know what the actual date was, but let's say it's April 15th. And they inquired, they booked, but during our consultation, they said, hey, just so you know, our date we're not sure about the date. It might be something else, but we want to use you. So a week later, whatever, they updated me and they said, oh, our date is such and such a date. But I had already put them into that spreadsheet as April 15th. And in my mind, they were getting married April 15th. Well, long story short, I get another inquiry from another couple at some point for another date and book them. And that's all well and good. Fast forward to a month before this, or a couple weeks before this other date, I get a call from the original bride saying, hey, just want to make sure we're on the same page for everything for such and such a day. Well, it turns out I double booked. I have 2 weddings scheduled for the same day because in my mind, the other couple was for the April 15th day. So I'm scrambling. I'm like, how do I deal with this? How did this happen? Well, it happened because I wasn't organized. I wasn't managing everything from one centralized location that has checks and balances against double booking and
right.
Overcommitting yourself. So I ended up having to hire an associate to cover one of the weddings, and I took care of the other one. And I had to have that hard conversation with the client to let them know I messed up. This is what I can do. This is how we can handle this. Early on in my career, a mistake like that is not great. It's never great in your path, but like it can be really devastating early on because when you're trying to build up reviews and your social presence and all of that, a ticked off client that says, oh, he double booked our date and sent somebody else and whatever, can backfire big time. So making sure you have protection in place in the form of a CRM or even contracts and all of that stuff is really important as early as possible.
Yeah, and I actually think even having photographers friends, right? As a backup. I mean, I remember my grandmother was very sick, and I'm a newborn photographer, and I couldn't. The family emergency, right? I couldn't be there when I'd promised that 2 families. One was from the grandparents were in from Arkansas, another one was from England, I think. And I had said, yes, of course I'll capture, the generations. I couldn't do that because I wasn't there, and they would be back home by the time I knew I was going to get back. And so luckily I had a great friend. I was like, I just need you to go and photograph this one setup. at these two places, and can you do it? Absolutely. But that's because I'd built up a relationship with them and had them as an associate prior to that. And my clients were actually very understanding, but I think it's really good that you have, in this day and age, you could get sick for your wedding, right? You need to have like friends and in your area that can actually be your backup. Never mind you just, double booked yourself. I still think it's like really important to have photographer friends that can.
Yeah. Photographer friends or just people in your network. Like, listen, the lines can be very blurred in your professional career. You have people that you know from Facebook groups or whatever. And the only real interaction you have with them is on social media. You're not hanging out with them outside of that environment or anything like that. But having a network that you can draw from, for a lot of people, it used to be Facebook groups and still can be that. One of the things that Shoot With Me solves is just allowing photographers to build up their network of photographers that they can tap on the shoulder when they need extra help. Right. That problem that I dealt with, that disorganization on my end, that mistake that I made, I could have solved it a lot easier. If Shoot With Me was a thing back then. It wasn't, but I hopefully have those checks and balances in place now. But listen, if something comes up where I am physically unable to be at a wedding, I have hundreds and hundreds of local shooters that I know and trust in my network that I can hire in an instant. It would be very easy. But
that's amazing. So one of the questions that I like to ask photographers, and some people like this question, some people are like, I'm never moving ever. But for example, if for whatever reason you had to move in the next 3 months, and where do you want to move to? Do you want to move to Hawaii, California, anywhere? Basically, if you had to move your business, what would be the first thing that you would do?
It's a really good question, and something that I thought a lot about. If I was moving somewhere new, it would likely be because I know somebody there, I have some connection, some sort of relationship there, and I would do anything and everything I could to leverage that relationship with that person to help build awareness for what I was doing. So, for example, let's say I'm moving to Hawaii because our best friends live there. So ahead of time, I would set up, if I'm keeping the same business name and everything like that, let's assume I am, I'd be switching over my Google business listing to that address, that location. And then I'd be connecting with whatever colleague I have or peer, friend or whatever, and basically saying, hey, I'm going to need your help to get going here. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to craft some sort of too good to be true offer. You're going to open up your phone and you're going to blast this offer to everybody in your contact list on your phone that's local and say, hey, my excellent wedding photographer friend is moving to the area, trying to get established. He normally charges this for weddings or sessions or whatever, but we're looking for 10 people that will do it for this in exchange for leaving a 5-star review or an honest review on Google Business, and kind of helping that get going and help spread the word and kind of use that relationship as leverage, not manipulating the relationship, of course, they'd be happy to help, but using those personal connections in whatever way you can.
I love that. I definitely love that. Speaking, I think I might know the answer. I always kind of try and guess the answer, but if you were to pick one form of marketing, what is your favorite? I mean, favorite in terms of, let's say, the most effective and that you semi-enjoy doing.
The simple answer is treat every client like they're the only client that's ever going to lead to any referral in the future. So basically, when you've been doing this a long time, there is a tendency or one of the things that you have to protect against is just kind of putting it on cruise control and going through the motions for each client. And when you do that, unless you really have systems in place that deliver a really high experience for the client, like by default, what ends up happening is, they might not notice things aren't the way that they're supposed to be, but like, that you're not treating them with the same level of care that you could be. So if you treat every client as if they're the only source of referrals for the rest of your business, you're going to treat them at such a high level, and it is going to lead to them talking about you and connecting you with other people. So those client to peer connections that you can have happen are really helpful. The other thing is just connecting. For me as a wedding photographer, there are venues that I love working at, and when I build up solid relationships with those venues, they naturally funnel people our way, not because there's some like backroom handshake or paying them off or anything like that, but it's because if I make their job easy in giving them excellent images to use and kind of providing them some marketing fodder, they're going to send couples our way because they know that client is going to get a great experience, and it's also going to help them out.
I really, really love that because I think I've seen in Facebook groups lately people saying, "Oh, I've been doing this 14 years, 16 years, 12 years. It's really hard." And I think sometimes we do get a little bit complacent as we get, we've been doing it so long. Maybe you're burnt out, maybe you're tired, but to actually take a fresh look at your business. And I love the fact that I've always believed in that. I treat every client as if they were like my best friend. I'm not giving things to them for free, but that like additional personal touch of like how you are interacting with them. And I love that about wedding venues too. If you are going on cruise control, because that guy's always been referring you for like 10 years and you just sort of take it for granted that there's not some new photographer, like you still got to work those venues as if they were brand new and treating their clients and their referrals like they are gold. Another thing I'm actually going to add to this, because you brought it up and I just realized this, as you get more senior, if you have more senior clients, photographers listening, I've been doing this for since 2010. And one thing that I realized is I got very complacent about my SEO and my backlinks. I got very lazy. And I just realized that I did something last week in terms of looking at my website, and I've lost a lot of backlinks because they're 14 years old, right? So I'm dropping because I'm not actively trying to go out and get backlinks, but these backlinks have gone. So I am dropping. It's because I got complacent about my website and ranking on Google. So I love the fact that you sort of treat it as if you're new, regardless of what marketing effort it is. You're a wedding photographer, software developer, 4 kids. How do you manage balancing your life? Do you outsource editing? We have so much things to do. And when you first get into it, you're like, oh, I just have a shoot and I just have to edit, and then realize actually I have to market, I have to do all the accounting, I have to do all this stuff. How do you manage that? The back end portion of it mainly.
Yeah. I think for me, it's building in routines that check a lot of boxes off. There's certain things that I do on a weekly basis that it doesn't matter what business I have coming in or what's going on with Shoe With Me, or I didn't even tell you about our other company, Storybook Design Co. It's an IPS service for photographers. Being that they're all photography based, there's some overlap that happens. So it's time spending checking emails and making sure that I'm not being a blocker for other things that are happening with Shoe With Me with any of our partners, or making sure that customers are all taken care of. So making sure initially that I am not the bottleneck, and then kind of making sure everybody else knows what the expectations are and what they need to be taken care of. But then for my own photography business, let's say I have a wedding this past weekend. I have systems and workflows in place to get the images into Lightroom and then get them edited using, AI editing software, and getting that back in. That part is so simple and easy because of those tools that I'm just going through and I'm making some tweaks and uploading it to the gallery and sending that out and scheduling album design meetings and stuff like that, where my wedding workflow is so fine-tuned for the actual like post-wedding process that's easy. I have email automations for managing leads and things like that. So I just go into my CRM and I zip things out that need to go out as needed. I'm not thinking about that. It's just kind of action. For Shoe With Me and Storybook, there are sometimes things that we're troubleshooting or figuring out on the fly, but we rely on pieces of software to make it easier to communicate with customers, to troubleshoot things, to relay problems to where they need to go. So in a way that this can apply to any photographer that's listening is figure out what the regular tasks are that you're doing on a consistent basis. That those tasks you're doing, whether you have clients or you don't, and get them all done as fast as possible, and have systems in place to get through that. Whether they're systems with software where you're using workflows that already exist, or you're making your own systems so that if you had to step out, somebody could step in and say, okay, this is the checklist of things that I need to do to keep the business moving forward. And there are times where having professionals involved really helps, like having an accountant that you can go to, having somebody that you can talk to about legal things or insurance. Doesn't mean you have to have them on retainer. It doesn't have to mean you're constantly employing these people, but having some go-to professionals that can answer questions for you is a lot better than you going into a deep dive into Google to try to problem solve or figure things out. So just putting those resources in place to problem solve when things do come at you that are outside of the norm.
I agree. I think also, I do think software can help to help me along the road, but I think sometimes there are things that, I like to have my printouts of my shoot flow, because some pieces are me doing it versus, a software doing it. So I like to have my checklist printed out. Yes, I have a clipboard. I'm old school. But for me, that mentally, visually, I need it, even though most of the time it's automated through software. So I love the fact that you say, like, just figure out your process and your workflow and just get systems in place. I don't think anyone's ever actually said that, but like, I love the fact that you said to get it down as if you were sick and someone else had to do it for you. Like, get those standard operating procedures, pretend you're a company and be like, okay, this is where my login is, this is where this is. And then if you eventually hire an assistant, a studio assistant, it's turnkey. You can do that. You can do more shoots if you want to. You can, have a kid, or be staying at home a little bit more and only doing the shoots. All good.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention on that's I think really worth noting is a lot of photographers, they are, a one-person show. They're doing everything. This may burst some bubbles, but like for those photographers that they are the one person that makes the company run, until they have systems in place that you can remove yourself from the business, you don't own a business, you own a job. And owning a job is fantastic. And I owned my job for years because at the end of the day, if I had to step out of the company for 3 months, the company falls apart. There's nobody else that's running the company for me. You want to get your company to the point where you could step out and somebody else could take over running the company based on all of those SOPs that you've built, all of your workflows for every step of everything that you do. This is how we import images. This is how we have our consultation calls. This is how we do everything. Until you have all that codified in a way that's repeatable so that somebody else can come do it, you own your job. And that eventually will feel very restrictive if you're not allowing yourself to kind of be able to step out. Because it's kind of like being a dairy farmer, right? Where a dairy farmer can't just like go on vacation for the week. There has to be somebody that's milking cows while they're gone, or there's big problems.
Right.
So yeah, just something to keep in mind as you grow and scale your company. You want to make sure that that you're not the only person that can keep your company running.
I love that. I think I see it a lot actually with wedding photographers. They definitely, there's quite a few that have a husband and wife team or a partnership team of one person's doing the business side, one person's doing the shooting, and you have to get yourself into a position of where you can outsource certain things that you're not necessarily loving, or it does end up running you. When you're doing weddings full time, what would you say? How would you cope with the seasonality of it? Because I know Philadelphia, you've got to have some seasonality to those weddings.
Yeah. Listen, the winters are always a little bit harder than the rest of the year. You do your best to kind of plan and build up a nest egg for the winter time when weddings are slow. But hopefully you're booking clients then, and you're getting some retainers. Just based on the way that I operate, like I always did like a fixed retainer payment for the bookings, and I tried to make it as low as possible so that it's not a friction point for the couple in their booking process, but it's also not so low that it's not helpful when they get a booking. Like I don't want it to be like $100 and then it's like, okay, I booked a wedding, I got $100, and it's like, well, January's kind of tight. And so just making sure that you are providing ways for revenue for those seasons. Also, another thing is just like the off season is a great time to finish wedding albums for couples, and maybe run some winter promotions on your gallery site so that you can drum up some extra revenue. But also take that time to really work on your business so that the things that you knew all throughout the busier season that you didn't have time to work on, you can work on it then, so that you can be building a stronger company that can go through different seasons of, busy seasons or not so busy seasons, or busy years or not so busy years.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you do even have, for example, with weddings, we know that we're sort of, I think in 2024, we're sort of in a lull. 2021, it was anybody with a camera is getting hired for a wedding photographer. I'm joking. But because of no one could get really married in 2020, but then we've sort of got that, what is it called, engagement lull, because no one met each other in 2024. So you have, in 2020. So you have to sort of I like the fact that you sort of slower years, and maybe you're sick, or maybe, you just moved somewhere, building your business up in terms of having the slower seasons. I actually do, after each shoot, I always have, I don't know, I think I watch Law and Order too much, is I have a post-shoot mortem. I call it a post, I don't know why I do, but I am always, each time of what could I improve? 14 years in, I'm still okay, I should not have, that child was too young to go to that park on location. The next time I'm going to, do something differently each shoot. So I'm not having this big change in my year on year. So I sort of keep my running list. But in my off season, I tend to, work on the business, work on the marketing plan, work on all that stuff. I have it going year round. Also in my post shoot, which I've gotten actually much better. But, the first few years, you're like, wow, why did that client turn out to be a nightmare? And so from doing this sort of analysis, I could go back and be like, oh, that's where I should have seen it in that email correspondence, or when they said this, now that's sort of making sense. Do you have any red flags of when you have initial inquiry, or even on that first call where you're like, spidey sense, this one's going to be a problem?
This might sound like it's not the answer to the question initially, but just track with me.
Okay.
A lot of photographers, I think, initially are trying to get any client that's willing to pay them money. So their messaging is very broad, and they don't really establish a target audience on their website. So what ends up happening is they end up attracting a lot of variety in clientele. Maybe it's different clients that want different types of sessions or whatever, but eventually you have to kind of niche down a little bit with the type of people that you want to work with. Because I'm a photographer. I use off-camera lighting. I use, a lot of true to life color, not light and airy. I'm not film emulation. Like I kind of, my images look the way that they look, and I don't change it from one client to the next. If a couple comes to me and I can kind of tell that they haven't spent any time on my website, they don't really know my work, they're just reaching out to me because they need a photographer and I'm a photographer. I kind of put the brakes on. I say, hey, at the end of the day, the two most important things are that you actually like our work, and that you like working with us as a company. If you think I'm a total idiot and you couldn't, spend a half an hour with me, let alone a full wedding day, well, then that's a non-starter. We're not going to be a good fit. And if you don't like the work that we do, we're not going to be a good fit. You could like me, could think I'm the coolest person in the world, but if you hate my work, it's not going to work. So establishing that up front is very important. I've had couples that booked us, and I didn't do an excellent job in identifying that. And I come to find out they're like, hey, can you make it so that it's like really bright behind us? And I'm like, oh, and that's not our style. That's not how our work looks. And do our best to try to, problem solve from that point on. But managing expectations, I think, is the biggest thing. And you as the business owner are the one that gets to establish how those expectations are formulated, and whether or not you're able to follow through on what the client's expectations are.
It was sort of a time when probably my website was a little bit more broad, or even my photography, I sort of went down a little bit more of a broad sense. And then I dialed it back and being like, okay, I'm just going to be true to who I am. But during that time, people would send Pinterest boards, and I was like, okay. And then a couple of people, I was like, hang on, I'm going to stop this right now. You can go on my website or my Instagram account, pick your favorites from there, and then we'll talk. Because right now I'm not emulating somebody else's. That's somebody else's work. And then we can have that conversation. Because even I saw, someone's booking a shoot for a newborn shoot, and they'll send me a photograph of a baby that's actually sitting up. And I was like, okay, but your baby is not going to be a Gerber baby sitting up looking really cute. Your baby's going to be 6 pounds, and that's what they're going to look like.
Yeah.
So I do think like having, being able to say that to someone, because people are like, oh, I don't know, I just Googled baby photos. And you're like, okay, well, go on my website, look at the newborn photos. That's how your baby is going to be in terms of size. And then we can do the cute Gerber baby when the baby's 7 months old. Come back, You've been doing this for 17 years. Do you have any funny shoots that you can talk about? I'm sure you have shoots that you can't talk about, but like, is there something where you're like, I cannot believe that happened? Or like, that was so funny, it should have been on like a comedy sketch.
I think I get asked this question a lot because, in 17 years, you see crazy stuff. In more recent years, I don't know if it's my memory that's failing me or what. I just kind of like don't remember all of the specifics of every wedding all the time. One that stands out: groom did not show up to prep. He was nowhere to be found. Nobody knew where he was. And I don't know, about 10 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, he shows up. He's fully dressed already. All of his groomsmen were like, hey, where the heck were you? What's going on? He basically said to them, like, it's none of your business. Don't worry about where I was. Like, let's get this thing going or whatever. And everybody was like, okay, like, what's going on here? What's wrong? So right before he's about to walk down the aisle, he taps the coordinator on the shoulder and he says, does that door over there work? And everybody's like, oh no, like this is actually going to happen. Like he's going to leave. And the coordinator was like, I think so. Why? And he's like, I need to spit my gum out. And everybody was like, everybody kind of let out a sigh of relief. Ceremony happened. He spits his gum out. Ceremony happens. Bride never knew he was late. He was a total clown, to say it nicely. He was a jerk for the rest of the night. for no reason. Nobody understands, or understood what the reason was. Never heard back from him again. They never ordered their album. I have no idea what the situation was. So not really funny, but really uncomfortable. That's the one that stands out the most.
Yeah, and you're like, what happened? Did he gonna like? I think there's sometimes you need closure on it. You're like, I have these images. Like, can you order your album? Or like, did you get divorced? Like, seriously, I'll do an album just of the bride. So
yeah, no, but like in the 17 years of shooting, I've worked with so many amazing couples and people that I just really enjoyed being around and whatever. And then you just work with some from time to time where they are just not people that have any interest in like building a relationship or kind of going down that traditional path of like, hey, we really enjoy each other. Like you really wish them the best. And you see them somewhere out, at a brewery or something later on, and you're like, hey, how are you doing? You catch up for a while. I have a handful of clients where if I saw them in public, I'd probably be like, I think I know who you are. I don't know your name. I may have seen you at a wedding, but like then you think about it, you're like, no, I shot their wedding. And they just weren't they weren't your people.
But also I think some people like just not into it. Like, I don't want to be photographed. Like there's some people and you're going to, I sort of, after 14 years, I sort of gonna get a couple that I miss on my red flags. I'm going to get a couple every year and I just need to like deal with it, move on as fast as I can. Otherwise it will eat me alive in terms of my mental headspace and just be like, the dad that just didn't want to be there, they're arguing the whole time, just move on. It's not my problem and it's not me. They just didn't want to be there, right? So at first I always used to take it personally that like I wasn't able to make them happy, but maybe a therapist can make them happy, right? Just not necessarily a problem. And you just sort of have to move on. We are in a service business and sometimes people are not necessarily the nicest to vendors or anything like that. Okay, just take it personally. So if you were to wrapping up here, we sort of give one tip to a new photographer. I know we've sort of talked about it earlier, but like if there was one tip that you'd say, hey, your friend's daughter's like, hey, I want to be a wedding photographer, what would you tell her?
I would probably advise them to think about the reality that like in their circle of people that they know, they probably are the photographer expert of their group. And they know a lot. They know more than their friends. They have, a nice camera, and they're the one that's being asked to take pictures at family events and with their friends and whatever. So they have this inflated idea of their skill set. It's the whole like Dunning-Kruger effect where someone's confidence in their experience or skill set oftentimes really exceeds what it should be based on their actual experience. And I'll just advise them that like a lot less than you think you do. So go into relationships with other photographers, really wanting to soak up as much as possible. Start by assisting. Assisting is not below you. I would obviously tell them, go create a profile on Shoot With Me and try to assist with other photographers, because working with somebody else for the day and getting paid to do so is the best form of education that you can get, because you can see how a real professional works and you can see what to do, what not to do, etc. And then as you build experience, second shoot a little bit and do that and continue to progress that way, rather than trying to just go from having it be a hobby to having it be a profession right off the bat. Like you can have that transition happen, and then figure out your business stuff. The business education is far more important than going to photographer specific workshops where you're going to learn techniques and skills. You can learn that stuff by trial and error, by assisting or second shooting or whatever. But the business stuff you're not going to learn on a wedding day or by working alongside a photographer. You're going to learn that from educators in the industry who are doing business education and things like that. So that stuff up.
And I love that. I also think that in a weird way, maybe I'll slightly disagree with you a little bit, because I do think working with a wedding photographer on a wedding day, you have much more exposure to actually what goes on, whether or not it's like the back end running of your business, but on the day of like how it should actually go. I always get jealous of the hair care industry, because they go and they learn their craft and then they apprentice, and we don't do that anymore. Like, if people started, 20 years ago, they would like go work at a studio or go work for a wedding photographer in order to build their business. It's great now that we can have a camera and we can set up a Facebook page and have a business, but there's not that, apart from, which is why I love recommending Shoot With Me, is because I do think you need to have that assistant, and even assisting somebody in their back end, like you get a relationship with a wedding photographer and it's like, oh, can I, come help you with, all the editing, or like the client consult calls. I had an intern, and she ended up being an assistant for me for a while. She wanted to get into family photography. This was back in 2012, and she saw the business side of it. And she's like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go second shoot. And she's been second shooting forever, and probably makes more money than me. But I think she was able to see what it took, and was like, I didn't think that was going to be all. I thought it was going to be fun, playing with kids, taking their photos. No, I didn't think it was going to be dealing with clients, CRMs, money and all that stuff. So I do think the more you can see a photographer in action, either on their shoot day or on the back end side, the better. So, all right, this has been absolutely amazing. So we will put it in the show notes, but tell our audience how they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on social media. You can just look Nathan Desch if you want to connect there. If you want to check out Shoot With Me, it's just shootwith.me, and Storybook Design Co. You can just Google it and find us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely, I know Shoot With Me is a fantastic platform, and I'm going to check out Storybook Design Co. because I know a lot of photographers need that help with their album designs for weddings, your family photographers and senior photographers. So that's been amazing. Thank you so much, Nathan. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.